As you recall in the previous training video, we learned how to create a database file, and we saved it in the exercises folder on my desktop. Let me go ahead and double click to open it up, and there it is, computer inventory. Now in this file, we're going to go ahead and create our first access object. It's going to be tables, because there is where we're going to store our raw organized data, or it's going to be data that we enter into it, and we want to be able to break it down into the smallest, most meaningful parts, or tables. So to create our tables, we had to go ahead and create a database file. And to open up the file, I can either double click on it here, or let me close out. You can open up your Access program either with the shortcut on the desktop, or click on the Start button and pull up the Access 2013 program wherever it's at in the Start menu. And if it's a recent file like we did here when we created it, the computer inventory, then it should be up at the top there. Go ahead and click on it to open it up, or you're going to have to go ahead and click on Open Other Files and browse for it and find it. Or, let me go ahead and close out. If you have the Access program pinned down here to your taskbar, you can right-click on it to get a jump list. In other words, I get recent database files that I've been working on in Access, the least of which is the one that we just created. And so if I don't use that a whole lot, eventually it'll roll off and just display the top 5. The top 5 recently used Access files. But if I always want it to be there, if you hover over to the right-hand side of the file that you always want to display in that jump list, you can see a little push pin. Click on it, and it puts it up and divides it into its own little pinned area, so it won't roll off if you don't use it for like years and you're opening up tons of files. So it's not one of the recent ones. Doesn't matter. It will always be pinned up here. Of course, you can always unpin it and it drops back down. Or if you haven't used it and it's not the top 5, it'll roll off. So let me go ahead and click on it to open it up, and there's the database. All the Access objects are showing, and we haven't created any yet because we're starting from scratch. So the first Access objects that I recommend that we create are tables. So we can go ahead and get the structure set up so we can enter our data into the tables, so we've got something to work with when it comes to doing queries, creating forms, or reports based upon that raw organized data. Now in the previous training video, when we created our database file, Access automatically generated a table for us, but because I wasn't ready to add fields to the table, I closed out of it. Now that I'm ready, let's go ahead and create that table by coming up here and clicking on the Create tab, which makes sense because I want to create something. Then come down here, go to the Tables group, to click on Table, and there you go. You get a generic name for the table, but we can change that later on, Table 1, and then Access automatically adds the first field for you. It's called the ID field. Now Access doesn't know if you really are going to use this, but what Access is trying to say is that when you create your tables, one of the fields ought to be a unique identifier for each record. Think of it this way. If we have a table for the employees, and we have a field that's called first name and a field called last name, well, you can imagine if you have 2 employees with the same first name and last name, what's going to be unique that identifies one from the other? That's why it has an ID field here, that with the new, meaning that anytime you add a new record, it's going to create a new number. And it's going to do it sequentially starting with 1. Then the second record will be number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So you can go ahead and at least uniquely identify each record by the ID field here, or the numbers that are automatically generated. Now, if you don't want to do it that way, and you want to identify your employees by their social security number, because that should be a unique identifier, or their employee ID, you can go ahead and update the field here and change it so it doesn't automatically generate a number, so you can go ahead and enter a number in. But to keep it simple, let's just go ahead and keep it as is, and I'm going to change the name of the field because this table is going to be my computers table. It's going to keep track of all the computers that each employee has within our company. So the first field is going to be a unique identifier. It's going to be the asset tag, or the barcode on each computer. So instead of ID, I want to go ahead and rename the label for this field to asset tag. To do that, just go ahead and double click really fast on the name here, and then you can see it aligns over to the left hand side and it's highlighted. Just simply start typing, and it will overwrite the field there. Then hit enter, and it automatically goes to the next field, and it brings up a shortcut menu for us to go ahead and choose the type of data for this next field that we want the front-end user to enter into that field. Are they going to be entering in a bunch of characters? In other words, short text, 255 characters or less, which, by the way, short text is new to Access 2013. In previous versions of Access, it was simply called text. If you wanted to enter in something longer, like you're going to write a big, huge book within a field, they had what was called memo. Well, in Access 2013, it's been changed to long text. So, if you have something that's more than 255 characters that you want to allow the front-end user to input into that field, do long text. 255 or less, do short text. So it says what type of data you want to enter into this field. I'm going to go ahead and do short text, meaning that up to 255 characters of either numbers or text or a combination. And then it allows me to go ahead and enter in a name for that field so I can identify the type of information that should be entered into that field. So after the data type, the type of data, now we're going to say is the manufacturer field, so we want to enter in for each computer the company that manufactured that computer. After I type it in, hit enter, automatically goes to the next one, says okay, let's create another field, choose the type of data, then give it a label for the field, then we'll go to the next one, and so on and so forth until you click off and you don't want to add any more fields. When you click off and you want to go ahead and add a field, just click on the drop down arrow to choose the data type, and then after that, of course, you can go ahead and type in a label for the field so the front-end user can identify the data that they'll be entering into the field. So with the manufacturer, you can see that part of the text is cut off. If you want to be able to see the entire field, just hover up in between the two labels there in the column headers until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, and then just go ahead and click and drag to the right, and it opens it up more. Or, let me move it again. If you double click really fast, it does what's called an autofit. It automatically fits the column to the left to the longest text within that column, which is right now manufacturer. So if I have other records that had up to 255 characters, I mean, it may look like this, or, well, maybe a lot longer than that. So what I'll do is I'll just double click really fast and leave it as is here, and not stretch it any further. Now, as you begin to see when I add these fields to it, the heads of the columns are the fields, the labels for the fields, and each row, when I start typing in information, is going to be a record. So here are the field names, type in each cell what belongs to that field, and when I type in all the information for each field in a row, and I go to the next row, that row above it is a completed record. And then I type in the information in the second row for those same fields as the second record, third record, fourth record, and so on. Now when it comes to designing your table, you can do it in this view, but there's another view, coincidentally, called the design view. Well, why not do it in the design view? I wanted to show you that you can design and enter data both in this view, which is called the datasheet view. In fact, if you come up here and you right-click on the Table tab, you can see that the datasheet view is highlighted over here, and then the other option is Design. Now, in the Design view, you can do a lot more than what you can do in the datasheet view when it comes to designing your table. You can go ahead and add fields, but you also have additional things that you can look at and do when it comes to tweaking your table. So let me go ahead and click off, and before we change views and go to the Design view, a couple of things. First of all, is that up here you have what's called the contextual tab or tabs. You've got a fields and a table that belongs to the table tools. So when you're working in the datasheet view on a table, it brings up these tabs with commands that are proprietary to the table in the datasheet view that you can use to work on. So when you're no longer working on the table, these tabs will disappear. So you got two tabs here. When I go ahead and flip this over to the design view by right-clicking here, or you can come up here on the Fields tab to the Views group and click on View. And if you look at that icon, you can see it's the pencil with the rulers. That means it's ready for you to change it to Design View. As you right-click here, you can see the pencil and ruler there. It says Design View. Or you can go on the Home tab and you get the same Views group with the Design View button to click on to change it to the Design View. Now again, we have two tabs that are strictly for the tables only. So when we're done with the table and we close out, these tabs will disappear. So when I go ahead and click on the Design View button, first of all, it's going to ask me to give this table a name. And as you recall, when I labeled my objects for my tables, I added the 3-letter prefix TBL for my queries, QRY. Those 3-letter prefixes will help me later on when I'm designing my forms and reports and other more advanced areas in Access that we'll be going over. Which one of these is truly a query, a table, a form, or report? Because even though over in the navigation pane it says tables, and we're looking at a table here, it won't do that behind the scenes in some of the areas that we'll be looking at. So I want to make sure I identify it, TBL, and then call this computers for my computers table and hit enter. It updates TBL computers. So if I have a query that's called computers as well, I won't get confused between what I want to choose with the computers table or computers query. If I have a 3-letter prefix that tells me that this is the table and the QRY for computers is for the query. Now we're in the design view, and here we don't have two tabs, we just have one. So depending upon what objects you're working on and which view, the design view or the datasheet view as far as the tables go, you're going to get different tabs that offer commands that are available for you to work in that view. Now over to the right hand side, let me come up here and click on Properties Sheet. If you see that, go ahead and close out of it because we won't be working on it in this video. And you can see up here, we've got the field name, the type of data that can be entered into the field, or data type, And then you got the description, which is only available in the design view, and it's optional, meaning that if you want to go ahead and add some notes about what the field is for and why you added it, it could be helpful for the next person that comes along. If you leave the company and they're like, I wonder why this field is there, they can read the notes about the field and go, oh, okay, maybe we should keep it. And you can see that we've got the first field here, the asset tag, and the type of data is auto number, which means it's automatically going to generate a number for each record that we add. So the first one's going to be 1, second one 2, 3, 4. It's going to be unique. It's not going to go for the first record 1, then the second record 1, and then the third record 1, again sequential. Then we got the manufacturer with the short text that we added. So if we want to go ahead and continue to design this in the design view, which is what I prefer, then we can go to the next blank field and keep adding more fields and choosing their data type or type of data that the front-end user can enter into that field.